Kennedy was exciting. Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." There were thin, young men as opposed to portly, gray-haired men who had been running the country. And America was at its zenith. We were the most powerful country economically, politically, culturally in the world. And we could make the world over in our own image. And we could fix what was wrong with us. We were young, we were innocent, and therefore we were very arrogant. The 40s played into it because we won the war, and all the losers and all our allies had been devastated by the war, and we hadn't. So our economy was unbelievably powerful. And we had won the war for democracy, so we felt good about ourselves. And standard of living was going up, the inflation was low, unemployment was low, suburbs were filling up. And in the 50s, there was a consolidation of American corporate power. And it just pumped stuff into the society. So we had so much material well-being. We had televisions for the first time. We had everything. And that gave us a sense that everything was possible, even doing good. We didn't have doubts about our wisdom, about our goodness, about America's intents and purposes in the world. We didn't have doubts. Now we have doubts. Now we're older and we're wiser. We didn't have doubts about what American power could achieve. We didn't have doubts. All that changed after the 60s. And the Kennedys were young and vigorous and intelligent and glamorous, and they had the Harvard people around them, and they had the glamour from Hollywood around them. And so America was ascending in all ways, so everything was possible. Things were changing, and they were changing for the good. And you thought that if you hurled your body and your mind and your instincts against a problem, the problem would give. There was reason to get up and expend all your energy. It was a fabulous time. My views of the world began to be formed once I left my home in a segregated school, one-room schoolhouse. My father was buried in a segregated cemetery in the early 40s. So there was no way for me to think ever that things were going to be perfect. I began to understand that the Kennedys were not everything that I had hoped they would be very soon, because I soon came to conclude that the Justice Department, which Robert Kennedy was running, and which ran civil rights, was a pretty paternalistic operation, and that it was condescending toward black people, which really drove me crazy. They're a bunch of corporate lawyers, you know, young corporate lawyers, or law professors. I mean, Nick Katzenbach condescending to me about race? I mean, I'm still angry about it. John Douglas, very nice man. But what does he know? I mean, his father was a senator, and his brother runs the Piston Coal Company that's knocking off the UMW. I mean, he didn't naturally learn these things, and he didn't learn them as well as he thought. Ramsey Clark, who is one of my dearest friends, was there. I wasn't very happy with him, or Nolan and Dolan and all those guys. So I knew very soon. And the Kennedys' message was that we only won it by a razor-thin margin, and you have to be patient. Well, we've been hearing patience since before the Constitutional Convention in 1787. And so at that moment, I knew that the Kennedys weren't all they were cracked up to be. Now, there was another giant problem. And I guess I began fully to understand that in December late December 1962, when I was on a round-the-world trip with my boss. And we stopped in Hawaii, and the U.S. commander of the Pacific Forces, CINCPAC, one of the most powerful military men in the world, all the U.S. forces in Asia were on his command, and he did a big briefing for us at his headquarters in Honolulu. And he said that the Vietnam thing was just a small blip, and it would be over surely by early or mid-65. And subsequently, after stops in a few other countries, we got to Vietnam. And I talked to people, and I talked to young people, people my age, in the military, in AID, in the State Department, in the CIA. And I concluded that David Halberstam's reports in the New York Times, which were far more pessimistic than the cable traffic we were getting back in Washington, were right, much more right than were the reports that we were getting from the embassy. And I concluded on that trip in January '63 that we couldn't succeed there. And when I came back and I tried to make that argument, I was shunted aside because of this can-do attitude, in part, and in part because of the racism. I mean, there were a lot of people who just couldn't believe that a little touch of American power couldn't just blow these little yellow people away. So that's when I knew that the '60s was going to be more trouble than I had hoped.